Hey, it's Amir and this is another daily 10 segment of the Talent Tango podcast. And I'm here with my brother Arash.
Hello.
Today, we want to talk dollars and cents, money.
This
Um,
is a touchy subject, isn't it?
it probably is a touchy subject. So compensation is always in recruiting. It's always a tricky piece when you're, asking someone what they want, clients what range they want to pay. They're all ranges. No one wants to get paid wants to pay too much and no one wants to get paid too little. And unfortunately, this bit of a game that exists is a difficult dynamic for us because
Agreed.
obviously we're trying to balance, as external recruiters, both sides. Bit of a conflict of interest because we want a better salary, right? Goes without saying. So
Well, I think you want to make all sides agreeable and happy,
yeah,
so to speak,
well,
right?
you want the best possible fit. So compensation's important. So, I think of an agency, on a side note, it's only focused on maximizing, you know, compensation, then they're short-sighted in terms of pushing a candidate into a role that might be too senior or the interview process too difficult for the bar they can get over. So that's an issue. I think
Well, your reputation is tied to that candidate, right? As a recruiter and or an agency,
yeah.
um, they're gonna remember where that person came from, good or bad, right?
Yeah, good or bad. And I think what happens is like a lot of times, I think there was a discussion on Twitter a couple months back even on this about, startups are really focused on finding out what the least they can pay is, right? And I understand limited budgets,
They
you
got
know,
churn.
a lot of churn. They've got to make sure they have enough runway, pay everyone what you'd want to pay, 10,000 extra for everyone that's going to add up. So I get what they're trying to do, but I think on the candidate side, they're always curious what market is. We hear that a lot. I want to get paid market. Well, what is market? Like, market is based on your skill set at the intersection of what a client values it at. And one company might value it at 2x what another company
Yeah,
does.
well, I think if you're a candidate that's on the market, or you're let's just say you are in the workforce, you know what your value is right now at the company you are or the previous company. Now, if there's been a layoff because of whatever reason, okay, maybe you're not as aware of the market, but the market hasn't increased like 50%. Your skill set is not all of a sudden going to command 50K more on average, right? We're just saying, there might be some specific niche situations where that's not the case. So when people say market, I think they're really just not wanting to shortchange themselves and pigeonhole themselves into a compensation range.
Well, yes, it's because they know that the company wants to pay the least they can to
Right.
secure the next hire on average. Not universal. I don't think this is a universal statement. So I don't think every company operates this way, but I'd say a fair number that
Well,
we
not
deal with.
not every company is going to pay an employee as much as they pay a CTO or a CEO. So their goal and incentive in some parts to run a good business to maximize profits, which most organizations we're dealing with and most organizations that people work for, they're not non-profit. So they are for profit. And part
Yeah.
of that is to get the most out you can out of your workforce by giving them as much as you can, but not giving them too much. So I think there is that line in the sand of, you got to make your current employees happy and future employees to attain them happy by giving them proper salary. But nobody wants to overpay anybody, I think is the point.
Well, you also then have, constraints depending on the size of the organization, whether they're established salary bands based on, what level you're coming in at. So they can obviously upset the existing hierarchy as well, because if they overpay you, and they're underpaying somebody else, that's a bad dynamic.
Well, then does that mean they're underpaying people they work with or work
Well,
work at
market
their current
well, it
company?
depends. Market, like, I mean, are they regrading? Like, are they gonna true up and let's say they hired, you 3 years ago and the company's going gangbusters now, and will they adjust to reflect, during the next performance? I think it really depends what each company's strategy is in terms of retention, because the cost of losing that candidate for 10K, but also providing that raise too late is really the key. So, obviously, you've got to kind of be cognizant. The performance evaluations are super important. The
Sure.
relationship with the manager, understanding, hey, this person's going up in skill. We need to pay them according. And if you miss that, it goes through the cracks. That's when people a lot of time people
One
are
of the
looking,
reasons.
one of the reasons is not just compensation, but they don't feel like they're being valued
Of
appropriately.
course.
So they start looking, and then that's a lot harder to rewind. I mean, you can obviously always, counter and try to keep them, which, we all know the stories of what happens when you counter. But nonetheless, I think being proactive and making sure, and I think this is where I was reading about IBM and how they have their, machine learning platform able to kind of identify people in terms of when they might be looking to leave or when they need, compensation adjustment. So I think technology, as it gets introduced and more companies start, tracking the right data and the data points, I think then we'll start being able to see, those things be more proactive versus
Sure.
a lot of it's reactive. Even when it comes to salary, like if you legitimately know how to value somebody's talent and experience level to the role, the value to the company, I think that's all going to be the stuff that AI will help us with. And I think it'll trickle down to smaller companies because it'll be a lot more common. And then, some of the stuff that we see, I think probably goes away and just gets washed away in the noise.
Yeah, no, I think it's knowing kind of where you think your value is one characteristics, and then what the market actually is willing to pay for your skill set. And obviously, I think sometimes there's a disconnect for folks. And if you're getting paid where you're at, there could be reasons for that, right? You might know some intricate part of their IP that's much more valuable to them than another organization or whatever the
True.
case is. So I think there's a lot of nuances when it comes into it. And I feel like at times, at least for me, a lot of times, I just wanna make sure we're in the same ballpark, right? Like, you don't want that delta of what you're expecting or what you're currently getting or want to get is just too far off because however great that opportunity is, if that delta is too big, for most people on average,
Yeah.
sometimes it's too big of a gap to overcome. So, obviously, in some states, I think hopefully more and more within a, short period of time, you won't be able to ask current compensation. California, you can't. So I think it's just trying to identify what would make this person make a move, not just compensation wise, but all other factors. And obviously, that's a big part of anybody wanting to make a move.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think compensation to me should be the final piece, right? Obviously, like you said, making sure expectations are within a
Reason.
range, a reasonable range. But I do hope that, if you're talking to somebody about an opportunity, there's other factors that makes the role attractive. Because if it's only monetary, then I actually am concerned, how long the person's going to stay in that
Yeah, of
particular
course.
role. So, that's something that would be a concern. So, yeah, I do think that, your skill set at your company and what you're valued in the market, all of these could be different. And then from one company to the next, I mean, it just depends what is needed and the pain point you're solving.
Yeah, and I don't know if we can get to a point where it's a lot more open. I think people want to hold their cards really
Well,
close.
this is the piece of negotiation where I think sometimes external recruiters help candidates, is
Sure.
that there can be that buffer to handle some of this awkwardness. But I think this negotiation and going back and forth a lot of the counters, again, I think it goes back to nobody wants to overpay bringing somebody on, and no one wants to take less than they think they can get. So this negotiation piece will always be there, and removing some of that friction. I think this is the part where you want it to be smooth. You want people to come in with the right positive mindset, and I think a lot of the expectation setting up front will help solve that.
Yeah, and I think part of that too is if you have an internal true up evaluation process, yeah,
Share that
exactly.
up front,
Yeah,
so
that
they're
those are
aware that they're not getting locked into whatever they're
yeah,
coming in
those
at.
are great pieces of information for anybody that's looking to tell somebody that could be potentially interested in their organization like, "Hey, this is our process. Don't worry whatever you come in at, that's not what you're stuck at for the next 5 years." Because also it's predicated on past, right?
Yeah.
How you've been paid for and dealt with in that capacity.
Tell us how you do this at your place of work. We're curious to see what those stories are, and then we'll be back tomorrow. Thanks.
Bye.